Today is the 24th of February, 2012. We're at the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
I'm Arthur Lawrence Smith. I was born in Troy, New York at, trying to think of the exact date.
I have you down as 29 December 1960.
December 29th, 1916. That's right, I'll get it right yet.
Now, did you attend school in Troy?
Beg pardon?
Did you attend school in Troy?
Waterford.
Waterford?
And incidentally, I should mention I'm a little hard of hearing.
That's fine. Now, did you graduate from high school?
Yes,
What year did you graduate?
1934.
All right. And when you graduated from high school, did you go on to school, college, or did you go to work?
No. I would have loved to, but it was the middle of the Depression, and I came from a family with my mother and grandmother and myself, and I had to go to work.
And where did you work?
I started out working for a textile company. It doesn't matter the name anyway. And what I did for 5 cents a dozen was iron or press men's boxer shorts. If you worked your tail off, you might make $4 a day.
Uh-huh.
After that, when they started to change the rate on it, I got disgusted and I quit. I had several other jobs. I worked for the New York Power and Light for a while, construction. And I finally went to work for a an owner, an operator of a garage, Color City Garage in North Troy, New York. He specialized with a gas station too, combination. He specialized in tune-ups, carburation and ignition. The boss was a graduate of the, I'm trying to think of the name of the school. It was it's in the Middle West. And he was one of the 3 recognized operations for that kind of work in the area. The biggest one was Romer and Zeller in Schenectady, and then there was Jack Troy in Troy, New York. That wasn't his name, but he took that name. And ours was the Color City Garage in North Troy, 113th Street and 5th Avenue. And what we did primarily was to rebuild carburetors and check out electrical systems for somebody who was unhappy with the way their car was operating, and they suspected it was either ignition or carburation, which it usually is, and we would correct it.
Okay.
So I would, mostly what I was I would pump gas and change oil and fix flats and that thing, but I also was learning the business from Ray Farmer, who was my boss, and he was good.
Now, did you do that right up until the time we got involved with the war? Or did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was in 1938 that I got the idea of enlisting. Looking at what was going on in Europe, it was a pretty much gone conclusion that you were going to be involved in it sooner or later anyway. So in 1939, November 10th, I went down to Albany and signed up.
All right. And you signed up for the Army Air Corps.
Yeah.
Now, what made you pick the Air Corps?
Well, let's see. When I was 10, Charles Lindbergh flew across the ocean and I know that it had an effect on me. I wanted to know what it was all about, so my father gave me a copy of the book that he first wrote, We, which meant he and the airplane. And from then on, well, I read all about it, one thing and another.
Had you ever flown in an airplane before
No.
that?
Well, I say no. Yes, once. My grandfather took me to a field in North Adams when I lived there, and I got a 10-minute hop or something like that. Yeah.
Was it an old biplane?
Yeah. It was what they call a new standard, but the new standard was in 1929.
All right. Now, when, okay, where did you go for your basic training?
Try New York. It was under the GI Bill.
No, for your basic training when you went into the service.
Oh, I thought you meant flight training. Mitchell Field, around near Hempstead, New York.
So you had basic training there?
Yeah.
And what was that like? Had that been kind of like your first time away from home?
Well, as a matter of fact, having enlisted on November 10th, which is not exactly warm, the first 3 or 4 weeks of basic training entailed marching around outside and learning how to march and how to salute and how to do that. So it was, well, I wouldn't say unpleasant, but it was not a stroll in the park anyway. And we also had times when we would sit around and listen to senior officers where they explained military courtesy and what you might expect you were going to be in for and all that stuff. It was interesting.
Was that your first time away from home for a long period of time?
Yes.
Okay. Once you completed your basic training at Mitchell Field, did you go to an advanced school?
I went to several. We had a 6-month course at Roosevelt Field.
Down on Long Island?
Yes, Mineola, near Mineola, Long Island. It's the same field from which Lindbergh started his flight. But anyway, the 6-month course was basic Air Corps mechanics. You'd have several weeks on propellers and several weeks on power plants and aircraft systems and structures and all that sort of thing. And it took 6 months. It was quite an extended course. And then I graduated in August and was what they call turn to duty. I went back to my squadron and became a member, a ground crew member.
Was that still down on Long Island?
Yeah, still Mitchell Field.
Okay.
For a while, and after until I think it was October or November the following year, we moved to Langley Field in Virginia.
Okay. And what
There we did the same thing.
And what did you do at Langley?
I was still a crew member in a crew of mechanics. I did whatever I was told to do.
Were you getting any flight time at all?
No. Now I might tell you, I had this idea from the very beginning of getting flight training some way or another, and the first thing I thought of was the military because I wouldn't have to pay for it. However, to be selected to go to flight training in the military, you have to meet certain conditions. The first place, you have to pass a physical, which is pretty, complex. And you had to have what they call 2 years of an accredited college or university or its equivalent. You could, however, if you didn't have that, which I didn't, of course, you could take an examination, a written examination, and if you passed that, you would be eligible, and you could submit your name for whenever they were going to pick anybody. So I spent the first several months at the library, at the post library, studying previous examinations. Of course, the examination that I would get if I was chosen wouldn't be the same one I was getting.
Right.
They had, questions and answers, giving you an idea of what you would be up against in the written exam. And when I figured that I was ready to pass it, I submitted my application, and subsequently I was told to report to this was when, by the time I was at Langley Field, to report to the base hospital for physical exam, and I flunked the physical, which ended my military career as a pilot. And I flunked the physical on insufficient red-green perception. I have to laugh at it because when I went to take my driver's test, you have to identify different colored lights. I never knew I was colorblind. I looked at something like this is green, it's red, it's amber.
Yep.
It still looks green, red, and amber to me. I don't know what other people see. While I was there, after that, I was picked to go to a specialist school out in Rantoul, Illinois, Chinook Field, where I had a 2-month course on instrumentation, how to work on altimeters, airspeed indicators, that sort of thing. And when I came back, I went right back to work as a ground crew member, only now I was a specialist. I got $6 a month extra.
Now, do you recall approximately when that was? Was that before Pearl Harbor?
Oh, yes. Let me recap in my mind. The first 6 months was from, well, it ended in August of 1940. So it started 6 months before then.
Okay.
I guess it was April, yeah. Or no.
Pearl Harbor?
No. Not Pearl Harbor, when I went to school.
Okay.
Pearl Harbor, I can tell you about that. That I do remember. I was at Langley Field. And it was a Sunday, and several of us were at the PX having coffee in the morning. Actually, it was afternoon. It was morning in Pearl Harbor, but and we got the news that the Japanese had attacked and bombed Pearl Harbor, and of course, all of us looked at each other and said, "Where the hell's Pearl Harbor?" We didn't know. We found out later, though.
Now, did things change immediately after that attack?
Yes.
Being in the military?
It sure did. 5 days later, we were on our way to California.
Oh, really?
To Muroc Dry Lake. You familiar with it?
I've heard of it.
Well,
It's in Southern
Edwards
California.
Air Force Base is close by.
Okay.
At that time, all Edwards Air Force Base was one 7,000-mile concrete strip and a few buildings. But now, of course, it's a big deal. But where we set up operations was on the flat lake bed. Muroc Dry Lake, when they say dry, they're not kidding. When it is full of water, It has a depth of about 4 inches. But it has an acreage was big enough so that we could land B-26s and take off there and have enough room left to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
One of our pilots had the bright idea to land a B-26 and not touch the brakes and see how far it would roll. He said after it got to 5 miles, he said, the hell with it. He stopped it. But it's amazing. This dry bed, it looks like mud that's dried in little patches, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as hard as a rock.
I think they used to race cars there too, didn't
Oh,
they?
yes, they do. They still do, I guess, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that and Salt Flats at Utah, I guess, yeah.
Yep.
They race cars. But anyway, we were there. What we did for about a month or so was shoreline patrol on the coast of California, looking for the possibility of Japanese submarines.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of cases of the little submarines, two-man submarines the Japs had, where they actually made some attacks, but we never saw any anyway. And then on January 31, we boarded a troop ship and took off, and 25 days later we landed in Brisbane, Australia. And we were there until for slightly over a year, when we moved up to Port Moresby in New Guinea.
Now, what did you do in Australia? Was it mostly training or preparing to?
Well, once the aircraft arrived, we actually started warfare, I guess you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
I went on my first mission on April 8th, 1941.
And on that mission, what was your job on that mission?
Well, my title was, I forget what they called it, but actually what I was a tail gunner.
Okay.
And incidentally, that's the one that I think I showed you. We took off from, incidentally, we moved from Ipswich, which is near Brisbane. We moved up to Townsville, Australia, which is about 500 miles north.
Mm-hmm.
And from Townsville is where we started to fly our first combat missions, which meant that you had to fly from Townsville to Port Moresby and start the mission from there, because that was the sort of the headquarters up in New Guinea.
Okay.
And we took off and started up, and we made landfall, but we were not sure whether Port Moresby was east or west. So we had been trying to raise them on radio, and there was no reply. We knew it was New Guinea, of course, but we didn't know exactly where we were. Turns out we were near Karima. So the captain decided to fly for 5 minutes this way, and if he didn't find anything, or 5 minutes the other way. And of course, in the meantime, we were running out of fuel and time. Daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Not dangerously, but the captain decided, I'm going to put this airplane down before it gets dark or we start running short of fuel. So to make a long story short, he decided to come in from the sea and touch down right on the beach where it's sandy, and then into the undergrowth, not jungle, but short stuff. and that's where we wound up. Nobody was injured. There was a few minor cuts and bruises, that's about all.
What about the plane?
The plane is still there.
Is it really?
So they say.
Huh.
Well, at least it was when this guy by the name of Claringbowl wrote that book that I've got here. I remember reading it when he said, all the crew were rescued, but such and such a number of airplane is still there. And I feel like saying, what the hell do you think? He's going to take off without any props?
Now, how long were you there before you were rescued?
11 days.
Really?
Yeah, we were not in Karima. We were only in Karima overnight, but the next morning, a gentleman, I would call him that anyway, a black, in a sort of a uniform, came running up and handed our captain a message. And it was from a Lieutenant Moy of the IIF, as they say in Australia, the Australian Imperial Forces. Mm-hmm. He was a captain. No, lieutenant, that's right. And he said, from where I was, I observed your approach and crash. He said, I will be with you at noon. Sure enough, he came up, and he had with him several other blacks, and they were carrying all kinds of stuff, and he was taking material and supplies up the Fly River to a rubber plantation. So we joined him and walked from where we were in Karima to up the Fly River to this rubber plantation. Took most of the day. Mm-hmm. And that's where we stayed for several days. Finally...
Well, what kind of accommodations did you have there?
Well, it was a rubber plantation. They were somewhat primitive, but actually we had a shower, a tank up on the roof that caught rainwater, mm-hmm. and it came down through a sprinkler.
Okay. How was your rations there, food?
Oh, let me explain that to you. We had food, but one of the things that I learned was that the natives of the country have what we would call a bread substitute, I guess. And it's called, don't tell me I'm forgotten, anyway. What it is the inside of a palm tree, mashed up and mixed with water, and then put inside a hollow bamboo tube and roasted over a fire, and it comes out like a big long pretzel. And somebody asked me one time, did you eat any of it? I said, yeah, I tried some of it. He said, what's it taste like? I said, like the inside of a palm tree. That's what it is. Sago, that's what it is, because it comes from the sago palm. Other than that, we had eggs, very little meat, lots of fruit, mangoes, and
coconuts?
Yeah, ordinary fruit,
yeah. Now, how did you get back to your base?
That's interesting too. They sent, when I say they, I mean people back in Australia, sent a 90-foot coastwise steamer and a crew up to near where the airplane was, a salvage crew. Mm-hmm. And they went in and stripped what they could find that was worth anything off the airplane and just left the rest, the hulk there. And while they brought us from the rubber plantation back to Port Moresby.
Okay.
And we stayed there just overnight, I guess it was, yeah. And the next day, we got a ride back to Townsville on a flying boat. An Empire flying boat, which is trying to think of the company that makes them anyway. A British company. 4-engine flying boat. With the inside all taken out, so we were just sitting on the floor inside like a big...
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But we landed in Townsville Harbor,
Yeah.
and then they sent I keep saying they, I don't know who they were, whoever was in charge of it sent a power boat out to bring us into shore.
Now, did the pilot get in any kind of trouble? Did the pilot get in any kind of trouble?
No.
No.
Hell no, it was the whole crew of us, the pilot and everybody else. Oh, perhaps I should explain that the reason we couldn't contact Port Moresby was they were under attack. And when they're under attack, all communications that can be read by the enemy are shut down.
I see.
And even the thing called an NDB, a non-directional beacon, which was what we were supposed to be homing on, and we couldn't receive it.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't receive it because it was shut down. And all that happened while we were deciding what to do. So when we got back to Townsville, the whole crew was given leave. Not a long leave, like 3 days, I guess, a 3-day pass, in other words.
Yeah.
And I went into Townsville to the Great Northern Hotel, which was was attached to the Great Northern Railroad. It was a railroad hotel, in other words, but it was all right. And the next morning, I should mention that, of course, I had a few beers the night before, and the next morning I was sick as a dog, and I thought I had a hangover. Now, I went out, finally got showered and dressed, and went out and was sitting on the curb when one of our trucks came in from the airfield, and a fellow I know was driving it, and he said, "What are you doing there?" I said, "I'm sitting here sick." He says, "Get in, I gotta go pick up some rations." He said, "Yeah, I'll give you a ride back to the post." So I got back, and I turned myself into the medics, and they said, "You got a fever of 104. So I went right in the hospital. What I had was dengue fever,
Oh, jeez.
what the Australians call breakbone fever, because you feel like your arms and legs are broken.
And how long were you in the hospital for?
About 11 days, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The treatment is APC, which stood for aspirin, something. I don't know what it is, but it's three elements together to see if they can help. Now, if it was malaria, they would use quinine. I had malaria later, but that's something else.
Now, did anybody else with the group come down with dengue fever?
I don't think so, no.
Just
Nobody else seen it. But of course, New Guinea is overrun with mosquitoes. And the mosquito that carries the unit, or whatever you call it, for dengue fever is the Aedes, that's spelled Aedes, I guess, however you say it.
Mm-hmm.
Egypti, Egypti, also known later as the stegomyia. It's not the one that carries the malaria unit. That is the Anopheles.
Mm-hmm.
and it's only the female that carries it.
Okay.
But anyway, I spent, I don't know how many days in the hospital recovering, and back to my unit, and that was that.
And where did you go next?
We moved, the next move from Townsville was up to Port Moresby. And we set up at 14 Mile. Port Moresby, as the name implies, is right on the shoreline, practically, you know, the city. And up there's a string of flight strips. The first one is at 5 Mile, and the second one is at 7 Mile, which is also where most activities take place. And then they go on, there's 12 Mile, 14, 17 Mile, and 30 Mile. So we were at 14 Mile for a while, and then 17 Mile.
Now, were you a flying crew member during
Yeah.
that period?
Yeah,
Is a tail gunner.
yeah.
All right, and that was on the B-26. The B-26.
Yeah,
And any contact with the Japanese at all?
yes.
Want to tell us about that?
Our captain told us, I don't want any of you crew members to try and be heroes and get yourself a reputation for shooting down the enemy. He says, just keep them the hell away from this bomber while we're making our run. And we all took that as good advice. So, in other words, I never managed to shoot anything down, but I shot at the Japanese quite a bit. The only time I'm ever convinced I may have killed a Japanese was not shooting down an enemy airplane. It was strafing a troop barge on one of the rivers on our trip back. I used to say to all of my buddies that the rest of the crew wants to see where they're going, but I want to see where we've been. The tail, you know. You're sitting there, and you're almost outside when you put that down. If you lean forward like that, you can feel the breeze on your head.
Yeah. Now, did your plane ever get hit with any flak or you know, bullet holes or?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
And I want to make it clear that I wasn't on combat very long. A combination of malaria and other things, and also I had my eye on a different job. And I wound up with it. I wound up, finally, as group maintenance inspector. That was a really good job. I worked in S4 office. I had my own Jeep.
So you were basically inspecting the work done by the mechanics,
Right.
making sure they didn't.
I used to have to inspect one airplane per squadron per month. And you usually get one that has just finished a 100-hour inspection by the crew. After which they would call their squadron inspector and have him go through and see if he could find anything wrong with their work. And then they would call S4 and say they have an airplane ready for group inspection, and then I would go and inspect it.
Now, what rank were you at that point?
Tech sergeant,
Okay.
finally.
Now, what kind of living quarters did you have?
Tents,
Tents?
pyramidals.
Besides the dengue fever and malaria, any problems with like snakes or scorpions or anything like
No,
that?
just mosquitoes. The area we were in, I don't think was not noted for scorpions. There was an area that some of the guys put in duty called It's in Australia, not New Guinea, where they had scorpions and, I can't think of the name of that area, but it was only 2 squadrons went up there. We didn't, my squadron didn't go.
Any contact with the natives at all?
Yeah,
How were you guys treated by them?
oh, they treated us like gods.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, they're black, they're Melanesians.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them speak a little English, but not much. They used to come into the camp area when we moved from Port Moresby, the area of Port Moresby, up to the first place we moved to was Dobadura, which is up near Lake. And that was a nice camp. I liked that. And one of the things that I liked to get a hold of were limes. Only that isn't what the natives call them, if I could think of it. Muri, M-U-R-I.
Okay.
That's limes.
So did you trade them cigarettes for candy for?
Yes, what they wanted was cloth. And I had a thing that was issued to me. It was called a mattress cover. It's something that you could put your mattress in and zip it up and protect it, but I never used it. Like I never used the pillow either. I used a jacket like this on leather and rolled up for a pillow. I had to have the jacket with me anyway, might as well use it. Yeah.
So you had a leather flight jacket.
Yeah.
Do you still have that jacket?
No, there's another tale of that. I played pool a lot, and in one of the bars that I went to a couple of years back, I had the jacket on the chair like this while I'm playing pool, and I came back and it was gone.
Oh boy.
Not only was the jacket gone, but my car keys were in it, and house keys. Fortunately, I was not that far from home, and there was another fellow there playing pool that I knew, and he gave me a ride back home he asked me if you got another set of keys. I said, yeah, back home. So he gave me a ride home to get the keys and go back and drive home.
Now, was your jacket decorated at all?
Just with my name and the group, the identification, yeah.
Okay.
The Red Raiders, yeah.
Any kind of painted insignia or anything on it? Like some of the decorated jackets?
Well, the bartender there figured there were a couple of guys there that he'd never seen before. He said, I figure one of them lifted it and it's gone, long gone. And I remember saying, the jacket I can live with, but what the hell's he going to do with my car keys? Yeah.
Now, did you get much time off? Did you get much time off when you were over there?
Oh, you had a lot of time off, but where were you going to go? Oh, I guess periodically you would come due for leave. And the first leave we got, that I got anyway, was to a town south of Townsville, but not down as far as Brisbane. It's called Mackay, or as the Australians say, Mackay. M-A-C-K-A-Y anyway. And that was a nice place. It was right on almost on the shore. The Great Barrier Reef. You've probably heard of that. Yeah.
Yep. Now, did you ever see any USO shows? Any kind of entertainment like that?
Yes. What the hell's his name? The guy with the big mouth.
Oh, Joey Brown?
Yeah, he was there. He came. And also Bob Hope.
Oh, you saw Bob Hope.
And the singer, the girl, can't think of her now. They were always welcome.
Uh-huh.
They did quite a job, those people.
Now, were you in that same area when the war had ended?
No, I was home by the time the war ended. See, they had something called rotation, where they took people who had been in a war area a certain length of time and shipped them back to the United
I
States.
see. How long were you overseas before you got shipped home?
3 years.
Oh, you were there that long.
Yeah. Yeah, that was finally tapped for rotation on in April or March, I guess, of 1945.
Okay.
And I was on the troop ship somewhere between, from that, by that time we were in the Philippines.
Yep.
And I was somewhere between the Philippines and San Francisco when the captain of the ship over the PA announced to all U.S. personnel on board, I have the sad duty to report to you that your president has died. That was April 15th, 1945.
Wow. What was the mood of the ship when you guys got that news? What was the mood of the people on the ship when you got that news?
Depends on whether they were Democrats or Republicans. Now, most all of us realize, regardless of who the president is, he's the
Commander-in-Chief.
supreme commander, you know. But if you're wondering, I'm a Democrat and never want to be anything else but.
Mm-hmm. Now, where were you when the war in Europe ended?
I'm trying to think of that. We got the news, of course.
Were you home on leave?
No, I'm still overseas. Oh, wait a minute.
Let's see, Roosevelt died in
when
April.
did it end?
The war in Europe ended in May.
Of 45?
Yeah.
I was home, yeah.
Okay.
I was home, that's right. Yes, what's the matter with me? I got married May 10th
All right.
on leave
Okay. When did you meet your wife?
in high school.
And you had, did you go together all that time you were in the service or correspond with her? Or?
We were in the same class,
Mm-hmm.
class of 34.
Gee, you guys.
But she was smarter than me because she was a year younger and she was in the same grade. And I had known her for several years. See, I had cousins who lived in the town when I lived in Massachusetts, and I used to visit them during school vacation, and we would go swimming. And there was a place in the Hudson River where we all swam, and this girl and her sister used to swim there too, so I knew them.
Mm-hmm.
And when my grandfather died in 1931, I was just about to enter high school. I just finished grammar school in North Adams, and I expected to go to Drury High, but I never got there because my grandfather died, and we moved back to New York State, my mother and my grandmother and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I entered school there, and of course, now, Mariah, my wife, and I were in the same class, so I got to see her every day practically.
Uh-huh.
But I never really thought, or I don't think she thought either, that we were going to be a pair for a while.
Yeah, you guys waited a long time.
Yeah. But I was still in the Army, and I got to leave. This is after the war, of course. Got to leave to come home. Oh, I know. And she had written me when I was going to mechanic school. And she had read in the paper that I had joined the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote to me and asking me, what's the matter with you? You're crazy, you could get killed doing that.
Do you want to hold up that picture, the wedding picture?
Yeah.
If you hold that up right in front of you, yeah, I can zoom right in on that. And that's your wedding picture. And when was that taken?
May 10th, 1945.
All right. And you were a sergeant first class at that point?
Yeah, I was a what?
Is that sergeant first class? Your rank?
Tech sergeant, yeah.
Okay. All right. And you got married. Did you get a chance to honeymoon before you went back?
Yes. I was on leave.
Mm-hmm.
See, when I came back from overseas, they gave you what they call a delay en route, which is the same thing as a furlough, but it doesn't officially detract from your furlough time if you ever have to use it again. And the delay en route specified that the Army has to return you, no matter where you are when you discharge. They have to return you, or not discharge when you get home, to where you enlisted.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I was at Angel Island off the shore of San Francisco when I was going to be sent home. So they had to put me on a train and get me to Albany. And even, I never got to Albany anyway, but I did get by train and got to Grand Central Station in New York, and I had a day there. And then, oh yes, I came home and I had my 2 weeks vacation, and on May 10th, Mariah and I got married.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a couple of days in New York, and then my orders said I was to report to Atlantic City to the Ambassador Hotel for R&R. And of course I took my wife with me and down we went. And we spent not the whole full time, because while we were there at the Ambassador, I got news that I was to report to the first sergeant. They had a first sergeant right on the level of the floor of the hotel we were in.
Uh-huh.
They separated married personnel and single personnel for good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the news report to the first sergeant, so I went down to where he had his little desk, and I reported, gave him my name and everything. And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "What do you want, in or out?" And I looked at him and said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Do you want to stay in the Army or do you want to get discharged?" I said, "I want to get discharged." He says, "Okay." He handed me a sheet of paper. He said, "Get all the signatures on all these departments and report here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're going to Fort Dix." And he says, "Get your wife and all your stuff out of here before that." So my wife and I put in quite a day getting everything ready. And I finally saw her off, and she's carrying her suitcase and some records that we bought and a little wind-up phonograph. But she finally made it anyway. So I went to Fort Dix. I was there overnight. And they have to give you a physical.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a busted eardrum in my left ear. And I remember looking at the doctor that did it. I said, "Why didn't you find this 3 years ago when I would have never had to go to Australia?" I was just kidding, but.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they gave me a 10% disability, not for the eardrum, but for malaria.
Uh-huh.
It didn't last long. After a few months, I guess it was like, I don't know, $29 a month or something. But it was, you could buy stamps with it anyway.
Now, you were discharged before the war with Japan ended?
Oh yes,
Okay.
I was discharged June 9th, 1945.
Okay.
The war didn't end till August,
Till August, right.
after Nagasaki.
Now, once you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill, or did you join that 5220 club?
No, but I was eligible for the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
I thought first about going to college, but this is funny. I was working by that time. Of course, I'd gotten a job. I was working for Bear Manning. I operated a pilot plant for making sandpaper,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on vacation at Lake George with my wife. And while we were there was an operator with a Piper Cub on floats. And I saw the airplane tied up at the. You familiar with Lake George at all?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it was where the main street and the street that goes out where they park the boats.
Yep.
Right in there. They had the pilot, the Piper Cub, and I walked in and talked to the guy. I said, "I see you got an airplane out here." Yes. So I said, "Well, can I buy some time and get a ride in it?" He said, "Well, there's an ordinance in the town, we can't take up passengers." So I looked at him a minute, looked out at the airplane, and I'm thinking, so I said, "Well, what's the score?" He said, "Well, we can give lessons." I said, "Okay, give me a lesson." He said, "How much is it?" And he told me. I said, "How about a half an hour?" Fine. So that was my first half hour of instruction on floats.
Huh.
It was a gimmick, of course. That was
Sure.
their way of being able to hop passengers.
Yeah.
But when I got back after the vacation and went back to work at Bear Manning, I was talking to my wife one day, and I said, "I still remember that riding that Cub up there." And I said, "I'm going to go up to Troy Airport and see what they have going up there." So I went up, and sure enough, they had a class going there. So I signed on, like after school, after work and weekends, and I went up, and the proprietor, as we call him, that ran the place, his nephew was one of the instructors, Tom McGrath. And I started flying with him in one kind of an airplane, a side-by-side Luscombe. And I had maybe an hour and a half in half-hour intervals with him, when one night I got to be friendly with him. We were out having a few beers. As a matter of fact, we were watching the Monday night fights, if you remember, was it Wednesday night? I forget anyway, on television,
Uh-huh.
on a little six. And we were talking one thing and another, and he says, "Look," he said, "my uncle would shoot me for telling you this because you're paying money." He said, "But don't sign up for any more time." He said, "There is something going called the GI Bill, where we have put in an application to run a flight school." And he said, "We should be hearing any minute now." He said, I will call you the minute we have authorization. So he did. And I was the first one signed up for the school.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through that. I got private license, commercial license, and instructor. And the day after I passed my flight check for instructor, I was hired by them to part-time instructor at the airport. It was like the blind leading the blind.
Now, how long did it take you to get your ratings?
Started in early August
Mm-hmm.
of 45, and by trying to think of when I got my private, September, I think.
Mm-hmm.
No, it couldn't have been September. Took longer than that. It wasn't very long anyway. I got my private license, which means you can fly and you can carry passengers, but not for hire.
Right.
Then I started on the commercial, and that's a much longer. That's 160 hours of instruction. And then after that, you can be any kind of pilot you want, as far as either commercial or well, it can't be an airline pilot, of course.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to the airline.
Yeah.
And then 40 more hours, and I got my instructor's ticket. And then I went to work at the airport part-time. I still
Mm-hmm.
kept my job at Bear Manning until 1949. And then I left and went to work at the airport full-time. But then the GI Bill sort of petered out, kind of fell apart, and it wasn't too good, so I left there and went for another kind of a job. And while I was working at this other job, which had nothing to do with flying, there was a phone call from inside the building. They called out and said, Art, you got a phone call from somebody, a woman. So I went in and I answered the phone, and this girl said, Art, do you remember me? And she gave me her name, which I forget now, but she worked for the FAA, where I had been several times to pass my examinations. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you're the only one I know in the area who's a pilot and knows the area, and we've got a job opening, and I'm looking for a pilot. It has to be an instructor. And I said, well, where I'm working right now, I wouldn't be too shy about leaving. Where is it and what does it pay and all that? It was in Poughkeepsie.
Uh-huh.
So I thought about it, and I said, okay, and then she gave me the man's name, Guy Philip Ellsworth. I'll never forget him. He's gone now. So a couple of days later, on a Saturday, I guess it was, I borrowed a Luscombe from a friend of mine at the airport, flew down to the Dutchess County Airport,
Mm-hmm.
Poughkeepsie, and walked in and met Phil Ellsworth, and he hired me. So I went to work there. And while I was there, after a while, you know, IBM, the company,
Mm-hmm.
IBM bought its first airplane and hired a big shot pilot from United Airlines to be their chief of the aviation chief. And the odd part of it was, when they hired him, they said, we've ordered an airplane from a place in Oklahoma, an Aero Commander. You know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he was to stop on his way. He was he came from somewhere in the West and pick up the airplane and fly it to Dutchess County Airport in Poughkeepsie. He got as far as Buffalo, and for some reason or other, he decided to land at Buffalo. Maybe it was getting night or bad weather, so I forget. When he landed, the nose wheel collapsed. So he had to stay there and have it repaired at Buffalo, whatever you call it.
Art, I'm going to stop you here. I got to change tapes. Okay, he had to have the nose wheel repaired.
Yeah. I had a trip out to Buffalo, and Libby Wheeler, the guy who was the fixed-based operator there at Buffalo Aeronautical, said, "Hey," he says, you're out of Poughkeepsie, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you know that you're going to have a new tenant?" I said, "I heard something about IBM." He says, "Yeah, he's here." I said, "What's he doing here?" He says, "Well, he came in here and I had a nose wheel collapse. We had to fix it. But it's ready to go now." And he said, "I thought it would be a good idea while you're here if you met him," so I did. And he asked me, he said, "I don't know the area very well." He said, "It looks like the weather is not going to be all that great." He said, "I'd like to fly the airplane to Poughkeepsie. I'd like to file an instrument flight plan. How would you go from here to Poughkeepsie?" So we got out a Jefferson chart, and I said, "This is the way I would go, down over Binghamton." And so forth. So that was it. So when I got back to Poughkeepsie and told Phil that I had met the new pilot for IBM, his name is Chuck McKinnon. He used to be a United Airlines pilot. And he should be here. He's going to be leaving tomorrow, I think, down here. So he came down and he talked to Phil and whatnot. There's one pilot, one airplane. You should see it now. They got 3 jets and I don't know how many pilots, but that was then. So he had a trip for the company to, not Boston, but near there, a few days later, and he wanted someone to go with him as a co-pilot. So he asked Phil, he said, "Can I take one of your men over?" He said, "We'll only be gone for a few hours." So he took me. And while I was on, he had me fly the airplane, an Aero Commander. I'd never flown one. And we got over there, and he said, just for the heck of it, he says, let's do an ILS approach. So I did one. Okay, he says, "Would you like to come to work for International Paper or IBM?" And of course, it looked like a lot better than what I was doing. I said, "Sure." He said, "It's going to be a little touchy," he says, "because I'm going to have to take you away from Mr. Ellsworth. He's not going to be happy about it." I said, "Well, you talk to him and see what he says." So anyway, I think what happened was that Chuck called the head man in IBM that was going to be his boss. And that man asked him, "Who is this person you're talking about?" Well, Chuck is telling me, "Does he have this? Does he have that? Is he a college graduate?" So anyway, to make a long story short, Chuck got a hold of me. He said, "Well," he said, the top brass said no dice. They don't want to hire you. So I never got to work for IBM.
And that was because you weren't a college graduate, or?
That, and I don't know what else. It may have been something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think he didn't want to get in wrong with the proprietor of Poughkeepsie Aviation
Okay.
Services, probably. But while I was there, it must have been a year or more later, IBM had now had a DC-3, and they had hired a few more pilots. And one of the pilots I'm trying to think of his name. He's dead now. We got kind of friendly and went downtown and had a couple of beers and whatnot. And he was talking to me, and he asked me about, you like it here? I said, I like where I live in Poughkeepsie, and my wife has a good job with the Spack and Kill schools, teaches 4th grade. He said, yeah, I like it. He said, the reason I'm asking, he said, I don't know why, he said, with your background and whatnot, you don't get a job with an airline. Doug, that was his name, Doug Hoffman. I said, Doug, I'm 30-some years old. I said, airlines don't hire new hires at 30-some years old. He said, no. He said, United, American, TWA don't. He says, but however, you know what a non-skid airline is like? I said, you mean a non-certificated air carrier? He says, yeah. I said, sure. He says, well, I used to be chief pilot for Transocean Airlines. And he says, I know their East Coast representative. He gave me his name and whatnot. He said, why don't you file an application with him? I said, okay. So I filed an application with him, and eventually I got a phone call. Wanted to know if I was still interested. I said, sure. So he said, can you be over here, Windsor Locks, Connecticut, tomorrow at, say, 10 o'clock? Yes. So I went over, and I signed on with him. And he said, you wait around here for a while. There's one of our airplanes is coming in, and he says the captain on it usually does the check pilot for ride. And I said, you know, the biggest airplane I've ever flown. I said, it was a Grumman Widgeon. It weighs about 9,000 pounds. I said, what's a DC-4 weigh? Well, he says 73,800 pounds. I said, well, okay. But anyway, I went up with the guy, and I passed the check ride. Actually, there wasn't any way you could flunk the check ride. They needed pilots.
Oh.
But all they had to do was make 3 landings and take 3 takeoffs, 3 landings.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you want to hold up that photograph of you in the
Yeah.
pilot seat? And when and where was that taken?
Beg pardon?
When and where was that taken?
This one. En route between LaGuardia and Miami.
Okay, you can put that down. How old were you there in that picture?
About 41.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 1957.
Oh, okay.
I was 41. I was born in 16.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you fly for them?
About a year. And I didn't quit or anything. They just more or less went out of business.
Mm-hmm. And then you moved on to the next airline?
Yeah, well, I was still working part-time for Poughkeepsie Aviation Services. But the next Oh, yes. I went down to Teterboro. I think was it Teterboro? Yeah. Where there's an outfit called Pilots Employment. I had heard about them, so I went down there. And I walked into this office, and there's a woman sitting there. She had been talking to somebody. I waited until she was finished. And she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I was down here looking for a certain person. I heard that he might be hiring." And she said, "He isn't here." I said, "Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. Where is he?" She says, "He's gone to Canada, the DuLine." She said, "Are you looking for work?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I've got a company that's looking for a co-pilot. Did you ever fly a C-46? I said, "No." I said, "But I know what they are." Well, anyway, let me get him on the phone and you talk to him. Well, to make a long story short, he hired me over the phone. I had to go home and get ready. And he said, you drive up to the big, what airport? Don't tell me I've forgotten anyways. So I drove up in my car. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's a big air in Quebec.
Not Montreal. Montreal?
That's the one. I drove up there, and I found out that this guy was working out of another airlines. And what they had was one airplane, two captains, one co-pilot, and I was going to be the second co-pilot if they hired me, and a dispatcher and some maintenance people. And that was the whole airline. Based in Trenton, New Jersey, called Coastal Cargo. So I asked the guy, "Why Coastal Cargo?" He said, "Well, that's where we started." He said, "The last job we had, we were flying flowers from Miami up to New York." He said, but anyway, he started to tell me about the DuLine. He said, "You know what it is?" I said, "Haven't the faintest idea." He said, "Well, this was during the Cold War, of course, and there was always the possibility that the Soviet Union might decide to send intercontinental ballistic missiles over the pole and into Canada or the United States. I don't know who decided this was a possibility, but it didn't make much sense. Mm-hmm. But in order to compensate for that, they decided to build across Canada, just above the 68th parallel, a series of radar stations approximately 50 nautical miles apart, starting on the west coast with number 1, and all the way over to the Baffin Island to number 42, a distance of some 3,000 miles. You know? Mm-hmm. And as nearly as possible as 50 nautical miles apart, but of course you couldn't always do that because there's a lot of water that intercedes there. Mm-hmm. But they did it the best they could anyway. So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be supplying them. And because up there, and this incidentally was March 15th, my first day. And, he was telling me about the weather. And they had warned me before that I had to bring heavy clothing, you know, so I did. So anyway, we started operations. Oh yes, first of all, we had to get someplace to operate from. So we operated from Montjoly. You know where Montjoly is? The end of the, almost the end of the peninsula up there. And you can look out and look across the St. Lawrence River. And from there, across the open water to another place. Anyway, he said what we're going to do is operate out of here for the time being until we can move up to Frobisher, which is up quite a ways, about 500 miles, as a matter of fact. Eventually, we operated out of Frobisher, and then we moved from there to a place called Fox Basin, and that was Site 30. And we operated out of Site 30, and we covered from 30 to 25 going westbound, and from 30 to 42 going eastbound, supplying them, mostly with drums of kerosene, because up there they depended on kerosene and lots of it for heat, light, and aircraft and whatnot, you know.
Yeah. So
And our airplane would carry, 31 drums of POL, they call it. POL stands for petroleum oil something or other. I don't know.
lubricants.
But it's kerosene.
Yep. And
And
so,
it was-
so you were an airline pilot for 35 years
Yeah.
total. So you worked for them, plus you worked for American,
Transamerican.
Transamerican, Aetna Life, Anheuser-Busch.
Yep.
Huh,
Louisiana and Exploration,
wow,
an international paper. IP.
yep. Now, how long ago did you retire?
1980.
Okay. With how many hours?
Altogether,
Yeah.
a little over 18,000.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
A long time.
Now, once you retired, did you continue to fly like as, you know, small planes like a private pilot?
What I did when I retired, my wife and I decided to leave New York, go someplace where it was warmer. So we wound up in Gainesville, Florida. We bought a house down there, but I still kept a summer place up on a little lake in northern New York. What the hell's the name of the lake? Well, it doesn't matter anyway. But when we got to Gainesville, I went out to the airport there and talked to what we call FBO, a fixed-based operator. And I told him, I said, I'm a retired airline pilot, and also I've been flown for several private air companies. And I said, I've got a type rating, 2 airplanes, Grumman Gulfstream, and a can't think of the other ones. An old one, goes back a ways. And I said, I'm also qualified as second pilot on a Falcon 20, which is a 500-mile-an-hour jet. You know? So I said, I could be of some help to you if you have somebody sick or something, you need a pilot right away. He said, okay. So I put my name in. Nothing ever came of it, incidentally, but so then my wife had heart trouble, and when she had her second heart attack, the cardiologist told me that I had to get her out of that, what he called that eagle's nest, which was the cottage I had on Glen Lake. 32 steps going up to it. He didn't like that.
Yeah.
So I had to sell that and find a place to live temporarily, so I rented a place in Saratoga Springs.
So you haven't flown in a number of years?
Well, as a matter of fact, I flew a little bit last year
Oh,
with a friend of mine who's a pilot.
he lives in the area? He lives in this area here?
Yeah,
And what's his name?
I'm terrible about names. Jim.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Now, what airplane or what airport did you fly out of?
Glens Falls Airport.
Oh, Glens Falls. Okay.
He works part-time out of there. His real business is they run a place where they sell cars.
Okay.
He and his brother, Barrett, Jimmy Barrett,
Okay.
God. He is been an instructor for many years.
Okay.
Oh, he's younger than me, but as my buddy would say, who isn't?
All right. Now, did you join any veterans organizations, like the VFW or Legion?
I did join the VFW for a while. I don't know, just sort of figured out.
Did you attend any unit reunions? You were part of the 5th Air Force, right?
Yeah,
22nd Bomb Group?
yeah.
Yeah, any reunions with them at all?
Yes, the 22nd Bomb Group held reunions starting in 1948, I believe, in New York. I went to the first one, and I went to a few others, but not every year.
Yeah.
The last one I went to was in Florida. Trying to think of where.
Have you?
But I think that's petered out. What happened, of course, is that most of them have died.
Yeah. Have you stayed in contact with anyone you were in the service with?
I stayed in contact with one, but he died. Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we went to Gainesville, that's where he was living at the time, he and his wife. And I talked to him on the phone. His name was Suskin, Al Suskin, and told him I was looking for a place to live in Gainesville, you know. And he said, well, I'll shop around and see what I can find. So he called back, said he thought he had just the place, described it and everything. I said, okay, Al. I said, you tell him I'll take it and I'll be down there. So everybody used to give me, the only guy I ever knew who bought a house without ever seeing it. It turned out to be fine. It was a few blocks from where he lived.
Now, is your wife still living?
No, my wife died in '99.
No. Do you have any children?
No.
No. Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Well, I think it certainly made me more tolerant of a changing condition than I had been before.
Do you think you would have pursued an aviation career had it not been for the service?
Probably not. Probably not, because I learned a lot in the service, even though I wasn't a pilot in the service. But being on the airplane and talking to the people, the Air Force is a kind of a, or Air Corps I should say, is a kind of a funny thing in the Army. You know, many parts of the Army, enlisted personnel and officers do not intermingle very much,
right,
except as duty calls. The Air Corps is a little different. I don't know why, but the captain of our bomber that went down in Karima, he and I talked to each other just like you and I are. And also, the major who was the head of I'm trying to think of what department he S4 for some reason or other stands for what does it stand for? I don't know what the S stands for.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah. But he was, when I was an inspector, he was, of course, my boss. And I talked to him just the way I talk to you right now.
Did you ever get back to Australia or New Guinea?
No. I suggested it to my wife one time. And I said, you know, John Scottnicky, who was another friend of mine in the Army, he's been back. And he talked to me about it. I said, I'd kind of like to go back. And my wife looked at the whole situation and she said, the New Zealand airline, what the hell? Qantas.
Qantas, okay.
Qantas states that from New York, or from San Francisco rather, to Christchurch or one of the other places down there, something like 14 hours in an airplane. And my wife said, no way am I going to get on an airplane that's not going to land for 14 hours. So we never did go. I would like to go back. Well, I should say I would have liked to have gone back and see some of the people that I knew back there in Australia. I had no way that I ever want to go back to New Guinea. I didn't know anybody there except a few mosquitoes.
You wouldn't want to go back and check on that airplane that you guys crashed. But
Yeah, see if we could fly it out of there.
all right. Any other stories that you'd like to relay to us? Did you want to hold up that one of those other books?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's about the 5th Air Force?
Yeah.
Any photos of you in there?
No.
No? Okay. All right, I got it.
This guy's name, Michael John Claringbold. I heard about him, and I got a way to communicate with him. And he told me about these books that he had that were for sale, and I bought 3 of them. I don't have the other 2 with me. But this one, The Forgotten Fifth, of course, the 5th Air Force had the reputation, at least among the 8th and the other air forces in Europe and whatnot, of being sort of like way out in left field. You're forgotten, you know. We often thought we were forgotten, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
We had the Supreme Commander down in the South Pacific was MacArthur.
Now, did you ever see him at all?
Yes,
Oh, you did?
from a distance. Not close up. No, but who I did see, and even talked to occasionally, well, Colonel Richard Robinson, he was our CEO. Of course, I talked to him. Was this guy, George C. Kenney. He was a general.
Okay. Do you want
He
to?
was the commander of the 5th Air Force.
You want to just hold that up and I can
Yeah.
zoom in on him? Okay. All right, got it. Okay.
Whitehead, I never met Whitehead. He was the head of ADVON, whatever the heck that stands for. I don't know, I don't remember anymore. But Kenney, of course, was the head of the whole Air Force. And Whitehead was this head of ADVON, and then the 5th Bomber Command was with where we were in, was Colonel Crabb, this guy. I never met him either, but I know about him. He flew his own B-25.
Oh,
I say his own, I mean, it was one of us assigned to him.
all right. Well, thank you so much for your interview.
Oh, you're entirely welcome.